Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 12th edition of the World Manufacturing Forum. And yes, at this point, a round of applause could be a good way to start with some energy this afternoon. Well, this year, World Manufacturing Forum is at MIND. MIND is Milan Innovation District. This is a freshly developing new innovation hub here, and partly in construction. As you saw, here technology and science meets research and education, public sector bodies meets private companies, and also all of the rest is working together, university and accelerator, to create innovation in one of the most industrialized territory in Europe. So this is an ideal venue to discuss our main topic, which is new perspective for manufacturing, Outlook 2030. Now, 2030 might seem far away, but it's here. And we are living some crucial tipping points. You know, tipping points are the critical points, where small changes can produce larger changes. And beyond that point, the changes are unstoppable. Companies, government, societies, the world has to make some strategic decision how to make it. Well, today and tomorrow, we're going to discuss with entrepreneurs, managers, industrialists, but experts and top officials from governmental agencies from around the world on how to face the new manufacturing models for the future. And clearly there will be your participation, but I'll give you more details later on that. And to begin with the welcome remarks and introductory remark, Diego Andres. I leave the floor to Diego Andres, who's president of the World Manufacturing Foundation. Welcome, Diego.
Good afternoon and welcome to the World Manufacturing Forum 2024, where the future of manufacturing is getting shaped. It's so nice to see the community joining back for these 2 days of deep dive in the world of advanced manufacturing, like a world that is changing faster than ever before. And we say this every year, but this is actually really happening. And if we can launch a video, I don't know who of you has been seeing yesterday SpaceX rocket coming back to Earth. I'm going to comment that, but let's enjoy this moment. This is mind-blowing. This is what happened when great minds and ambitions, goals actually get together. And it's not just, the engineering challenge. I mean, I don't know if you noticed the joy into the control room of those people, right? And then we often talk about the attractiveness of our industry, and then we are sometimes see it as the industry, the manufacturing industry is perceived, the way it's perceived, and let's look at that, and really let's keep this image in our mind. And let's keep this image now, because we really live in extraordinary times. For a moment, let's wear our virtual reality handset, and let's try to fast forward to 2030, as we did in putting together the report. But let's try to go further, like 35, 40, 50, right? How does manufacturing look like? What do you see when you envision your company, the ecosystem it operates in, and how have we evolved? But most importantly, how would you want it to be? These are complex questions, right? Questions that none of us can really fully answer today. But yet those are precisely those questions that we must ask ourselves in leading our companies, our industries, and our people into such future. These answers lie in the action we're actually taking today. We're gathered today into the Mind Milano district, a place that symbolizes transformation and progress. The place once hosted, of course, agricultural fields and refinery, and then was the platform for Expo 2015, which really launched the city of Milano as we know it. Today, and today is a melting pot of scientific research, life science, startup, and larger companies. And this really evolution mirrored the very transformation of the manufacturing industry, an industry that evolved while building on its past. And so this is the perfect setting for us today, where we'll cast our looks towards the 2030. A mere 6 years from now, but actually a world that will potentially be very different from the one we know today, or at least this for most of our companies and most of our region. Unlike the past forums, we really decided to expand our focus. Instead of addressing a single challenge, a single vertical, we have really expanded the scope to address the interconnected issue that shape the future of manufacturing. And why this? Yeah, as I said, is because the changes we face are not just fast and faster, but just complex and really deeply interconnected. So we really need to take this holistic approach when we look at this. So we see geopolitical shift, trade wars, resource nationalism, but I'm not going to step into that as you will hear in the report. But what's so-called, it was anticipated, the tipping point, so geopolitical shift, economic turbulence, technology disruption, social issues, environmental imperatives, and regulation are really the tipping point that we studied and analyzed. As manufacturers, I trust we all recognize the role, our role, of primary engine of growth. But growth alone is not enough. It must be a responsible growth driven by a commitment, a real commitment to shape the future we want to create. A future built on the foundation on innovation, sustainability, and inclusivity. But to do so, let's remember we need to stay competitive and an attractive place to be for our young generation. And let's remember the video we just went through. So by 2030, the industry might be unrecognizable compared to what it is today from many aspects. But navigating these challenges, it won't be possible in isolation. It really requires collaboration, getting together across nation, industries and sector. We really must ensure that even if as a nation we seek technological sovereignty, of course understanding self-sufficiency in energy and raw materials, but we maintain open channels of collaboration because this in isolation isn't possible. And this is why WMF, international collaboration, remains a cornerstone for us. And this is why over the years we've built a strong network of global and regional partnership which make us strong. From the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, to the World Economic Forum, Confindustria Lombardia, MTDG North America, INDABA in Africa, Intelligent Manufacturing in Asia Pacific region, SPS Guangzhou in China, and Abu Dhabi Industrial Development Bureau in Middle East, and many more to come. These are really the partnerships that foster the cross-border dialogue and innovation necessary for progress and the pursuit, at the end of the day, of the WMF vision. Just before we dive into this exciting conversation and session ahead, I really want to thank our partners, Confindustria Lombardia, Politecnico of Milano, and IMSI, as well as our sponsor institution colleagues, and of course, each of you really for being here with us today and make this impactful. And I also want to recognize two initiatives that for us are very fundamental, which is YML, Young Manufacturing Leaders, and Women in Manufacturers. This is fundamentals, and those are two very relevant ingredients for the future of manufacturing. As now we embark on this journey together over the next 2 days, let's really remember that the future of manufacturing is for real in our hands. Let's use this opportunity these 2 days to really shape it boldly, responsibly, but overall, really together. I wish you really all an inspiring World Manufacturing Forum 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Diego Andres. Well, the precise, impressive landing of the SpaceX launcher was very inspiring, especially considering that that's a tipping point in terms of space exploration, the space economy. And today, the space community, global space community, is in Milan for the Astronautical Congress, World Congress. But clearly the main event in Milan is here today, the World Manufacturing Forum. And so to get closer to the main topics we're going to discuss and the aims of the WMF, let's welcome on the floor Francesco Buzzella, President of Confindustria Lombardia.
Good morning to everyone, to the World Manufacturing Foundation partners, institutions, colleagues, and to all the attendees here at the Mind Innovation District. If, on one end, the central theme of the 2 days forum with an outlook to 2030 for manufacturing is extremely positive and useful for entrepreneurs, especially in this era of continuous shocks. On the other hand, this edition of the World Manufacturing Forum comes at a very delicate phase for the European industry system. Once the leverage guaranteed by the supply of the low-cost gas was lost, competitiveness margins were drastically reduced. This combined with the choice to ideologically embrace green policies by regulating and prohibiting without technological neutrality is leading to the disappearance of entire markets, such as the automotive one, which have guaranteed European well-being from the post-Second World War period until today. To give an idea of the severity of this crisis, I mentioned some recent data belonging to two symbolic sectors, of traditional manufacturing and of manufacturing of the future. I'm talking about automotive and semiconductors. New cars in the European Union fell 18% in August to their lowest in 3 years. The European Automotive Manufacturer Association data shows the fourth consecutive monthly drop in electric vehicles, 70% drop in Germany and 33% drop in France, just to give an example. Among the effects of this easily predictable crisis, there is the halt of the battery market. The Swedish battery manufacturer Northvolt, which has active partnerships with various European car manufacturers, including Volkswagen and Volvo, will cut its production by 25% workforce due to the difficult macroeconomic context, which is also affecting their liquidity. The ban of internal combustion engine cars, focusing everything on the electric one, brought us in a dramatic situation. Now, European institutions have to come forward with urgent relief measures before new CO2 targets for cars and vans come into effect in 2025. Engineers are saying that a total transition to electric by 2023 is unrealistic. A more moderate and balanced transition would be necessary. Furthermore, we need a new system for calculating emissions, not on the exhaust, but on the life cycle. The European industry is not just automotive. Let's go to see some recent data relating to sales of semiconductors, an essential component for modern industry. The Semiconductor Industry Association announced in September that global semiconductor industry sales hit 50 billion during the month of July 2024, an increase of 20% compared to the July 2023. However, looking at this data in detail, we see a huge gap between big global players. While in the Americas there is a 40% growth, in China 20% growth, and in Asia 17% growth, sales dropped dramatically in Europe, minus 12%. These results proves that Europe is losing ground towards the US and China. As a representative of the industrial system of one of the most manufacturing region in Europe, Lombardy, today I can only raise the alarm. Europe is rapidly taking the path of deindustrialization, risking evaporating decades of well-being and wealth. Italian and Lombard companies, Confindustria, are in favor of green economy and sustainability, but sustainability must be not only environmental, but also social and economic. If Europe wishes to reverse this trend, it's an imperative to develop policies supporting the industry, allowing the development and the innovation of new technology, avoiding over-regulation. Furthermore, industry needs energy policies based on a mix of sources, need a more aggressive reduction of interest rate to free up companies' investments, and, as indicated in the Mario Draghi's plan recently presented to the European Commission, we need investments amounting to 800 billion per year to counterbalance the US and the Chinese industrial investment plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco Buzzella, President of Confindustria Lombardia. Now the floor goes to the Scientific Director of the World Manufacturing Forum, Professor Marco Taisch.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's really impressive to see all of you here, and let me share the welcome of this year to the World Manufacturing Forum. There are two main novelties this year. The first one is the concept of tipping points that was already mentioned. The reason why we have decided to go straight to give know-how, information, suggestions to company, because this is exactly what we do with our report. You are aware of the concept of the 10 recommendations that we used to have, and you will see them here. The reason why we went to tipping point is the following. The world is not gray anymore, it's black and white. Competitiveness is black and white. Geopolitics is getting black and white. Energies is getting black and white. Or you are on the positive side of the tipping point, or the company is on the positive side of the tipping point, and the company will be successful or survive. Or if you are on the wrong side, there is no chance to survive. And this is exactly the strong message that we want to share with you and we want to convey you. Every single company should be on the right side of the tipping point, and for this reason we have introduced this novelty. That's number one. Number two, if you are aware of the title of the report from previous year, they were very focused on a specific topic. This year we have decided to go broad. We have decided to give an overall vision on the future. 2030 is a target. Could be 2040, 2050, as was said by the president of the World Manufacturing Foundation. But the message we want to give you is we need to look more and more into the future. Of course, we should not forget the daily business. We should get to the end of the year. We should make our balance sheet to be positive. But at the same time, we should have a medium to long-term perspective. And that's why, by choosing 2030, we have decided to give a stronger message. About the program, just to give you, to guide you through the program. There will be 3 keynote speakers. You see that tipping points for the manufacturing sector. You see this concept is coming, and it will be our friends for the next 2 days. And then we are going to have our friend and the Vice Scientific Chairman, David Romero. He did with the editorial team a great job, and And I think by far this is the best report we have had so far. So if you want to have a coffee, you need to study, otherwise you won't get the coffee right at the end. So be careful to read it, right? And then, you know, W, like women in manufacturing is one of our most important initiative. Christina Yon will share with us his view and what the activities that we did throughout the entire year has been done. We are really proud of this initiative, and exactly this morning we were sharing our concept with other colleagues from overseas, that we should extend this initiative to other regions and continents all over the world, because that's for sure a very important topic. And then we are going to have our panel, right? And you see here, climate change is there, it's important, is not solved. It's not a new topic, but it's not solved. And for this reason, we need to have a different, a new perspective. Technological competitiveness, technology is the base for solving and addressing many solutions. So we should not forget how to involve technology in the decision, into the product, into the manufacturing system, into the supply chain. And you see, we're listening to 3 different continent perspectives, from US, from Europe, and from China. Demographic challenges. It's not just about talent. It's not about just a citizen. Not just about people. It's more. Demographic means how the different generations are coming. You know that in a few years from now, in the companies, there will be 5 generations working. The boomers, Gen X, Y, Z, and Alpha. And that will be a huge challenge for our companies. And then talent. Of course, again, is not an old topic, but again, is not a new topic, but is not being solved. But sure, there will be a new input, a new thought, and that's all together. You see that all these ingredients together is something that will build the future of manufacturing. And then we need to look at the supply chain. We need to look at the overall perspective, and that's also something that we are thankful to our speaker. Innovation, of course, is there. It's not just about technology, not just about people. And that's it. It seems simple. Was not easy to build such a, I would say, a very relevant panels. But let me thank all the speakers who are decided to come here, and I'm eager to listen to all of you. I will be sitting over there for the next 2 days in order to learn more and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marco Taisch. Let's move to Regione Lombardia, which has been supporting in time the World Manufacturing Forum, and we welcome Marco Alparone, who's Vice President and the Counselor for Budget and Finance.
Good afternoon to everyone. It's a really pleasure for me to stay here in this stage. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of our President, Attilio Fontana. It's a privilege for Lombardy to host this important event. Lombardy is one of the most dynamic and competitive regions in Italy. It attracts many foreign companies and skilled workers from all over the world. The beating heart of Lombardy economies is the manufacturing industry. Lombardy companies produce high-value products and are investing in new technology. However, sometimes, also in Lombardy, it's difficult to find qualified people available with the necessary skills. For this reason, Lombardy is striving to maintain its competitiveness, to investing in vocational training. The goal is to bridge the digital skills gap and train people for the job of the future. By promoting close collaboration between the world of education and business to ensure that training programs are aligned with the needs of the productive market. Lombardy looks to a brighter future with ambition. Thanks to the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, the region has the opportunity to accelerate its digital and sustainable transformation. Il PNRR investment covers different sectors and will contribute to improve the competitiveness of the Lombard production system. In conclusion, Lombardy is a region that knows how to combine tradition and innovation. The ability to attract investments, talent, and business make it a benchmark at the national level. It is necessary to continue investing in training, research, and innovation to maintain this leadership position. Thank you so much for your contribution and for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco Alparone, Regione Lombardia, for supporting World Manufacturing Forum. Now it's time to get closer, and you heard about tipping points. And Marco Taish said it's time to be on the right side of the tipping point. It's not easy. Absolutely, you have to understand, you have to read carefully what's happening in the different, tipping points we're going to go through during the panels. But let's start with the first keynote speech with Ian Cronin. Ian Cronin is Community Curator at the Center for Advanced Manufacturing Supply Chain at the World Economic Forum. So welcome, Ian, and the floor is yours.
Passed the first hurdle of getting up the stairs. So it's great to see everybody. It's great to be back at the World Manufacturing Forum. Ian Cronin, it's wonderful to see some familiar faces and meeting some new ones. I'm sorry you have to look at such a large version of my face on the screen there. But I'm very pleased and excited to be here. The expertise in this room I've already had a chance to talk to is really incredible. And I know I'm excited for the next couple of days. As you can see, the topic that I was asked to talk about today, and in only 10 minutes, David, this is a little bit of an unfair ask to cover this. Future-proofing manufacturing and supply chains is obviously a huge issue that we're only going to hit the tip of the iceberg here on. But I think it's also important to take into account that, as we think about what that actually means, future-proofing, I think, is perhaps an impossible aim, but it's a worthwhile one to go for anyways. For me, at least, future-proofing means to think about how do we try to build systems and maybe even more importantly leaders who are able to adapt to the changes that are coming. I have the honor at the World Economic Forum to help lead the community of chief operating, chief supply chain, and chief procurement officers. It's an incredible community I could say a lot about, but there's probably three things that I think are especially relevant to the conversation today that I'd share from my recent interactions with them. The first one is on this idea of resilience as we sort of think about it. And one of the big elements that continuously comes up is that, we all said we learned a lot during the pandemic. We have to think about redesigning value chains, thinking about building resilience. We're in a moment now where, you heard, we've already had speakers talking about the economic challenges we're in, where companies are feeling under pressure, executives are under pressure to get back to making their companies as competitive as possible given market conditions. At the same time, the next disruption, everybody knows the CEO and board are going to come back to these leaders of operations and say, hey, what happened to all those resiliency measures that you were working on? So there's this huge challenge of trying to balance what we all know we need to work on, what we need to do with finite time and resources, with these competing challenges. I think a second major point that has come up frequently in the conversations is, particularly for small and medium-sized suppliers in our larger ecosystems, a growing disconnect between organizational ambition and the operational reality we live in. I'm so excited to see some familiar faces talking about sustainability later, because that's a huge topic, particularly for this group. You have organizations, large multinationals, making really important commitments to being net zero, to moving towards decarbonization of supply chains, but their suppliers are saying, hey, I don't know how to do that. I can't do it. There's a huge cost there. I don't want to lose the business that we have, but I'm not sure how to go on this journey with you. And so I think we have to think collectively in this room, if this is something that's really important, what is our responsibility to act as an ecosystem to help everybody go along that journey? And maybe the third thing I'll mention in regards to this particular community is that probably I would assume this applies to most of you in this room, is that leaders of operations, manufacturing, supply chains, procurement have very little patience for fluff. And they frequently remind me when I start veering in that direction. And so to that end, and we'll see if I can figure out this remote, what I'm going to try to do in the next 6-7 minutes or so is to provide a bit of a framework. We already heard some of the major trends that are shaping the environment, but a framework for thinking about the trends shaping this need to even talk about future-proofing. But then also, what are the industrial strategies that we're seeing from the World Economic Forum's perspective of leaders taking to try to adapt to those trends? So we already heard some of these trends, and if you've followed any publications from the World Economic Forum, you may have even seen this. But it's no surprise to see technology, climate change, and geopolitical tensions at the top of it. I love seeing all the cameras come up. I think we'll share this so you guys can get a copy of it. But again, I think while those trends stay the same, it's an evolution of sort of what falls in those buckets. I mean, none of us can go to any of these conferences lately on the technology side without talking about AI. And for those running manufacturing facilities, that may sound strange because we've been talking and using machine learning for a long time now, but what's the role of generative AI? What's the real value? What is it going to do in manufacturing? Maybe we've seen more disruptions in sort of office settings than we have actually on the factory floor, but it's coming. I think we probably have a number of colleagues here from the southeast of the U.S. who've been hammered by 2 hurricanes in recent time. And these disruptions are happening all over the world from a climate perspective. And so how do we think about all the impact? And then, of course, I think you could open any of your news apps on your phone and you don't even have to scroll to be reminded of the geopolitical tensions and challenges that we're all facing. And so I think when we think about adapting to this, from our perspective, we have I think we got out of order here, but I'm going to jump to this one and then go back. What we have is sort of two key areas where we think that there's action has to be taken, and it's really at a company level and then at a country level. And so if I jump back to this one, what we're seeing already is companies thinking about what are the major trends or the strategic elements they need to take into account to adapt to these trends. There's 5 core ones. I think the first one is really thinking, about this idea of regionalization. How do I have local capacity that is globally connected? It doesn't mean we're abandoning global supply chains, but we're actually thinking about this multi-local element to it. How do we think about what is the difference between using technology, doing digital, we have some cute terms for each of these segments, to actually being it? What does it mean to have that be a part of the identity of your company and your operations? I think the other big element, and we already sort of heard people talking about it, but is skills. It's people. Attracting, developing, retaining talent. These are enormous challenges. And how do we want to sort of shape the narrative more broadly for young people, for existing operators, and what that means? On the sustainability front, again, I think it's easy to talk about ESG or CSR in sort of a passing way or from a marketing perspective, but it's very different for that to be embedded in the actual cultural and operational elements of a company. And then, of course, the customer. I mean, I think this is something that, sometimes it's easy to leave out in a supply chain conversation, but how do we design our supply chains to be ready for changes in what, not only what the customer wants, and we can talk about customers want more sustainability, but where is also our customer base going to exist in the future, and how do we make sure that we're planned to and prepared to deliver for that? Now, going back to that idea I said at the beginning, there's sometimes a disconnect between the ambition and the operational reality. And from some of the research that we've already done, we've seen already a big disconnect. I think I won't go into sort of every metric on here, but perhaps the most striking one is companies saying, I need to be digital, but only 1% of those we actually talked to managed to eliminate manual spreadsheets. I think I had an Excel file open right before I walked in this room. So it's a huge challenge of sort of what does that mean? That doesn't mean we're not making progress. It doesn't mean that companies couldn't be 80% of the way there. But if this is really what we want to do, there's a huge disconnect in this space. With that said, we do have people leading in this space. and really taking steps to try to address each of these. And I know all of you can read, so I won't go through every bullet on this slide, but I think if we think about an example of being digital, I had an interesting conversation the other day with a manufacturer who's saying, look, we're implementing new technologies, we're really thinking about what are the core technologies. We're using a machine vision technology to identify defects in some of the parts we're getting from our suppliers, but then they realize that it's not just about that technology, it's about where do they deploy it. And they realize they're spending a huge amount of money, they identify a defect, and then they have to send that back to their supplier. Where if they deploy that technology in with their supplier, they can identify that before it even gets sent to them. And so how do you also think about the strategies around deployment and where these things exist, and to continue to shape this so that it's not, we are digital, we're being digital. It's a journey. You have to keep reevaluating where we're at. I mentioned that there's always two elements to this. There's things that companies can do inside their four walls, but if we want to future-proof to whatever extent we can, it requires an ecosystem. It requires an enabling ecosystem. 7 years ago, the Forum published our first report called the Country Readiness Report for the Future of Production. We have now, just in 2 months from now, I'm giving a bit of a teaser here, we'll publish the next iteration of that. And for this one, what we've identified is these 7 core factors that are shaping what does it mean for an ecosystem to be ready for what manufacturers need today, and also what they're going to need in the next couple and coming years. And so, again, I won't go in sort of the interest, I see that clock ticking down to 30 seconds here, but into each element of what's in here. But what I think is interesting is that not only can we identify these core elements that are shaping the readiness of an environment, but also then trying to actually apply that. The World Economic Forum is based in Switzerland, so again, giving a bit of a teaser of something you might find in the report is the ability to take that framework and then apply it and say, okay, how is a country doing across each of these metrics using publicly available data and applying that to say, are you building an ecosystem that is ready? And even more importantly than saying, okay, here's where this country is, allowing countries and also companies operating there or considering operating there to say, here's the types of collaborations that we can work on to make us even better. So I want to wrap up here in sort of with a final word to say, look, part of my responsibility at the World Economic Forum is to take all the things that we've just talked about, sort of what's happening in companies, what's happening in ecosystems, and try to think about how do we bring them together? How do we bring the small and medium-sized companies together, moving in the same direction as the large multinationals alongside policymakers? And not only get them moving in the same direction, but do it at speed. And that's certainly a challenge that I can't do on my own with my own team. And so I hope that I can rely on the people in this room. I already know some of them are helping to do this. And hopefully I can rely on a lot more of you to go on this journey with us. But in the interim, I'm really looking forward to the conversations in the days ahead. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ian. Happy to have you today and tomorrow for a conversation that can go on starting from these points. But Professor Marco Taj has been teasing vividly the World Manufacturing Forum report, and with good reasons, because over the last decade, the WMF report has anticipated some of the main trends and topics in the industry: skills, AI, supply chain. Last year was new business model. So I'm looking forward and can't wait to hear from David Romero, who's Vice Chairman of the World Manufacturing Forum, the presentation of the 2024 WMF report. Please, David.
Good. So welcome. It's really a pleasure on behalf of the editorial team to share with you our 7th report. It has been a journey over the last 12 years organizing the forum and preparing the report for you. And as Marco was mentioning, we're living in a moment where we need to look into the future, but we need to act for the future now, and that was part of the inspiration that we got for the development of this report, looking into the 2030. But as we move into the future, what are the milestones, what are the tipping points that we need to face and we need to thrive to become successful manufacturing ecosystems and companies? At the present times, I mean, as I was mentioning, we just go into the news. We're living in what we call a VUCA manufacturing world, where yes, we have a little bit of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity in our daily operations. And what we want to do with the report, and this has been an evolution of the report every year, is to provide tools for you to be prepared for the future and to thrive into the future. So hopefully this VUCA manufacturing world and the characteristics that describe it by the end of the presentation may look a little bit different, and that's the same wish that we have when you finalize reading our report. So what I'm going to do through my presentation is bring you through a strategic planning journey, right, where we first need to start with a strategic foresight exercise. So we look into the future and outlook 2030. So what needs to happen in the next 5 years, that after passing this 2030 mark year, are we going to be ready? Our manufacturing scenarios are going to look positive, or are going to look negative, or maybe something in between. Hopefully, we want to have positive scenarios, that we have overcome those tipping points and the efforts that we have done before the tipping points had reached us to an accelerated positive movement. And that's going to be based on the decisions, again, that we make today. So yes, we look into the future, and when you look into the future, it's very important to use a scenario. So a scenario planning, you will find in the report on what the future could look like. Again, hopefully a positive future. We define 4 scenarios. First one related to the green transformation as a green engine for the future of manufacturing. We have the technologies. I think we're developing the skills. We're developing the business models to have a circular economy where green markets are finally consolidated and the consumers are supporting our greening economy. So yes, we have to do our own thing as manufacturers to produce sustainably, but also we need the market jump in to consume in a sustainable way. So that's one of the futures that we're looking and describe it in this first scenario. Second one is the technological divergency in the future of manufacturing. We would like to see a future where we have digital dividends out of our digital transformations rather than digital divides. So that's another aspect that we're trying to advance innovation and cutting-edge technologies to serve our environment, to serve our society, and of course our economies. A third scenario that we look into the report is the refocus on core capabilities in the future of manufacturing, and this means that sometimes it's good to come back to basics, to really look into the natural basic sciences and how we can redesign materials and how we can redesign our manufacturing processes to be more sustainable from its real bottom lines, from environmental, social, and economic perspective. And the fourth one is the regulatory fragmentation and efficiency focus on the future of manufacturing. And we need to become more efficient nowadays with all the new trade wars. We're seeing a lot of the ways of conducting businesses changing. We need to prepare for that. We need to be strategic about it. And again, that's important to have this strategic planning, which sometimes it's a little bit difficult for companies to have this culture. Day-to-day operations are challenging. So of course, first we need to exist, and then we look into the future for sure. And for doing that, the third activity that we conducted in the report was to conduct a market factors analysis. So we conduct a pestle analysis. We try to look into the different driving forces that are shaping the future of manufacturing towards the 2030, which is our target outlook year. And we look into different geopolitical, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental forces shaping, again, our economies, our market, the whole ecosystem of global manufacturing. And again, I was mentioning, we look, yes, into the future, but we need to know where are the milestones across the road till we reach the 2030, and hopefully after passing the 30 year, we're going to have a positive outlook, not just a simple outlook, but a positive outlook. What are these tipping points that we discussed? Some of them were already mentioned by the previous speakers to me. So when we look into what is happening with geopolitics, yes, we have the trade wars, the economic decoupling, the resources nationalism, the technology sovereignty. We have economic tipping points, the obsolescence of manufacturing business operating models, wage inflation, rises of production resources, costs, shifts in global demand patterns. But what I would like also to stop now is that some of these tipping points, and especially when combined this tipping point, some of them actually are positive, some of them are actually negative. How we can balance them, how we can work with them, again, to try to transform them into positive tipping points. Social tipping points, technological tipping points. For example, we're living in a moment that, yes, as we look towards the 2030, climate change and sustainability is a big challenge for us. 2030 is going to be a big tipping point if we succeed or not to reduce our emissions and reduce the global warming. On the other side, 2030, for example, it's a very positive year from a technological perspective because we're seeing that a lot of the technologies that we require to combat the climate change, the global warming, are becoming more affordable, more accessible for even the SMEs, so we can really make a big transformation, not just only the big OEMs, the big players, but really transforming our supply chains to create a huge impact for our environment, for our planet. We have also the legal tipping points, environmental tipping points, and all of these were brought together into some efforts to future-proof our future of manufacturing. So we identify the challenges across the road towards 2030, and then what we're going to do about it. So we pick a nice framework for you, where you can identify what are the drivers, what are the pressures, what is your current stage as you move also into what are the responses that you're going to have, including, what are going to impacts that you are going to create. And here also we combine a little bit of our previous work when we talk about geopolitical actions, right? We need to rethink, and it was already mentioning, we need to rethink our supply chains, how we make our manufacturing operations and our supply chains more resilient. So we make, a look into the future, but again, a little bit of retrospective analysis. We have a nice report from 2022 where we look into redesigning supply chains. So if it's interesting for you and a driver and a pressure for your business comes from the geopolitical disruption forces, maybe also have a look into our 2022 report. When you look into what are the economic actions that we need to take, we already mentioned, for example, the tipping point of obsolescence of some of our manufacturing, operating, and business models. So we need, of course, to move into business models being servitized, AI-based, data-driven, or circular. This needs to be agile. We have a need for speed to really face the fast-moving market in where we are operating. Social actions, human centricity has become a very relevant topic. So how we design for human centricity, how we design for inclusivity, diversity, so we can really leverage the talent across generations that we have available, especially when these in some places because of demography could be a little bit scarred. So we have done some works also on skills for the future of manufacturing. So again, we're combining some of the old but still goody reports that we have wrote with some of the new ones. Technological actions, so we need to technology enhance, use technology, again, as I already mentioning, for example, to face climate change. We need to use technology to create inclusivity in the workforce. Technology, if we decide it, can be a positive driver, it can be a positive tool to improve our manufacturing operations and supply chains. And then, of course, legal actions, regulatory complaint. We need to be responsible environmentally, socially, and how we can transform those regulations and also the needs for environmental responsibility into competitive advantages for our business and supply chains. To wrap up, we provided an outlook, we created different scenarios, we highlight the different tipping points, we try to provide some tools for you to react on those tipping points, and then of course, once you have started to conduct a strategic planning exercise, there are a couple of tips that our editorial team has gathered for you, and hopefully this would allow you to make better use of the report that we produced for you, for this year for you, but also some of our previous reports that are entangled and interconnected to the work that we did this year. The first recommendation is about embracing change to overcome critical manufacturing challenges in a VUCA world. And you will see that we always highlight 3 elements, like the skills, which are the people, the technology, which of course are the tools, and the culture, which are our processes. Our culture is represented by our processes of how we do business, how we create value for our customers. So we highlight always these 3 aspects, and when we know for sure change is coming. Like it or not, every day it's different, and hopefully if we plan for that change, we can take advantage of those changes to be the front runners, be the leaders in the manufacturing ecosystem, and create positive impact. So change is coming, let's embrace change and move ahead of change to be that leader company or that leader supply chain. Number 2, leverage business intelligence and data analytics to navigate the grand manufacturing challenges and opportunities. I mean, a lot of what we are preaching with the report, it's summarized here. We need to become data detective. I think the tools are available for us to conduct good retrospective, good prospective analysis to see what we have done right in the past, what we have done wrong, learn from that wrongs, and try to improve for the past or continue that positive journey that we started with certain practices in our businesses. Third, foster innovation. I mean, change. We can resist change or we can lead change, and if we want to lead change, that means that we need not only to become leaders, but become also pioneers, to become innovators. So innovation needs to be at the heart of our manufacturing transformations, being digital, green, resilient-oriented transformations, but this always will start with the people. We need to have a creativity, adaptability, entrepreneurial thinking, ingenuity. We need to leverage those values, those competitive advantages, right? Rely on a good, well-prepared, skilled workforce, and combine it, yes, of course, with the technologies that we have available to transform and create new business and operating models for our companies and supply chains. 4, plan strategically. Already mentioned by Marco, mentioned by me, right? Yes, we understand that day-to-day operations are quite demanding. Most of the time we're just stuck there. And then when the future reaches us, right, because sooner or later the future where it's going to reach us, then we act a little bit surprised. We want to really promote the use of exercises related to the outlooks, related to foresights, when it comes to technology, when it comes to culture, when it comes to skills, to be prepared for the future. Number 5, implement robust risk management practices, especially when you want to lead, when you want to innovate, you are taking risks. And the whole point of taking risk is when you are the front runner, you are the one that is able to set the rules. And of course, with all innovations, with all leadership efforts, risk come, but if risk is properly managed, there's like a big prize at the end of this effort of innovating and leading. 6, identify and adopt best manufacturing practices to cover the basics of competitiveness. Sometimes, yes, we want to innovate, we want to lead, but there are certain things that maybe we should not, try to reinvent the wheel. And here what we ask is to look, where I need to just simply follow the standard, adopt the best practices, and again, it's a call for focusing on core competences. We can, of course, not do everything, so we need to be especially looking into the future where we're going to concentrate of our efforts, and looking again into best practices, core competences as part of a strategic planning exercises. It's quite relevant. 7, appreciate sustainability as a manufacturing business opportunity rather than as a predominant change. I mean, regulations are coming for better environmental performance, not only of your own company, but for your whole supply chain. And this means that we need to work more collaboratively to transform not only our operations, but for the whole supply chain, from raw material extractions to the distribution and logistics, to give our products to our customers. So sustainability, again, can be a challenge, can be an issue, but also can be an opportunity. And again, it's better to embrace it as a source of potential competitive advantage. 8, explore new manufacturing technologies that can support that digital green transition. So again, I was already mentioning, I think technologies there available. The question that sometimes we ask ourselves, for example, with all the CO2 capture technologies being developed, with all the technologies focusing in energy efficient, smart manufacturing, water efficient, smart manufacturing, material efficient, smart manufacturing, the technologies are available. Sometimes we ask ourselves like why we're not leveraging more of those technologies, those tools that we have available to transform our business and operating models to deliver better social, environmental, and economic perspective for all. 9, investing in building a talent pipeline and developing future leaders for strong manufacturing sector. People is so key for this. I mean, I love, and this is something that I really appreciate from so many definitions that I've read about, Industry 4.0 or smart manufacturing or digital manufacturing. I like one definition about smart manufacturing that tells that the future of manufacturing, a true smart manufacturing environment, ecosystem, it's about the combination of technology, information, and human ingenuity. It's really how we think about using technologies to create change, to create positive change, what really creates the impact. And that possibilities rely in a skilled workforce and in a motivated workforce to make changes and make use of the technology, again, to create positive good for everyone. Last one, building strategic partnerships towards a competitive manufacturing business ecosystem. We need to compete sometimes, yes, but we also need to collaborate in some other times. So this concept of competition, it's a new way of doing business that we need to develop, to further develop in many companies and supply chains, because of course, healthy competition always helps to push innovation forward. So let me finalize by, first of all, thanking all the editorial team that made possible this report. You see many faces here. Also, let me thank our International Advisory Board that also help us to define and create the storyline of this report. And hopefully, as I was anticipating at the beginning of my presentation, this VUCA manufacturing world can change for you. Conducting the proper strategic planning, scenario planning, market forces analysis that we have provided for you as tools in our report. It can change from a VUCA manufacturing world where the meaning of volatility becomes vision for your companies and supply chains, where uncertainty becomes understanding, complexity becomes clarity, and ambiguity becomes agility. So it's time for action, and with this, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, David. David Romero, thank you so much. That was terrific food for thought and will be the base of our discussion over the panel. today, and tomorrow. But before we move over to the open discussion, including your participation, let me introduce Dr. Steve Smith, who's a lead author and researcher on tipping points. He's a Hoffman Fellow at the World Economic Forum, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. That's good. Actually, I'll have it a little bit closer. This is a prop for later. Thank you to the World Manufacturing Forum for inviting me here. It's a huge honor. And congratulations to David and his team on a fantastic report this year. We're certainly going to be using it for the next Global Tipping Points report. So I'm Steve Smith. I work at the University of Exeter's Global Systems Institute, and I'm also a Hoffman Fellow at the World Economic Forum. So it's wonderful to be here, and I'm going to be talking about tipping points. Firstly, what are tipping points, and what are the risks and the opportunities? Because for every risk, there's an opportunity as well. And we're looking at Earth system tipping points. These are the things we desperately need to avoid. And also, there are human system tipping points that we also want to avoid, but we also have this fantastic opportunity to design and to trigger positive tipping points for sustainable change. So what are tipping points? Well, imagine when you were a child, your mother told you not to do this, but imagine don't do that, please, but you could lean back on your chair, and to begin with, this system has real resilience and stability. It goes back to its original place, like the ball in this valley, when it's disturbed, goes back to its stable location. But eventually, if you disturb it enough and you'll go across a tipping point, and the difference is that at that pivotal moment, the balance of forces between the forces that are trying to keep you in the existing system are overtaken by the opposite forces, what we call the positive feedback, the self-reinforcing feedbacks that cause you to tip into a different system state. So these basically are tipping points, and the drivers of these tipping points are these feedback effects. There's various ways of describing positive tipping points, what they are. The colloquial way is to say that change happens slowly and then all at once. A small additional change can trigger an outsized, disproportionately big effect. In our Global Tipping Points report, we use the definition that a tipping point is a point beyond which self-propelling change occurs in a system under fixed boundary conditions that gives rise to a qualitative change in state. And so that self-propelling change is supported by these strongly reinforcing positive feedbacks within a system. And we come to positive tipping points. This is more specifically to do with the point at which there is self-propelling change for sustainable technologies, practices, or behaviors. So what we're doing here is we're taking an unsustainable system state and we are acting, we're intervening to change the underlying structures, the valley, so that that valley gets increasingly less and less stable so that it incurs and triggers the positive tipping point that we want. This is all very, intangible, isn't it? It's quite abstract. It's difficult to understand. So let's take a more tangible example. Here is New York City, Fifth Avenue, Easter Day Parade, 1913. What do you see? An awful lot of motor cars. You may notice just here, there's one horse and carriage. It's difficult to see, but amongst all of these motor cars, a single horse and carriage. And that's in 1913. But if you go back 13 years to the year 1900, what do you see in 1900? Same day, same street, Fifth Avenue Easter Day Parade. Everything is a horse-drawn carriage. There is one motor car right there. Everything else is a horse-drawn carriage. So that's a historical example of a technological system that had a tipping point and changed very quickly in the space of a decade or two. And of course, we have examples of such tipping points throughout history, and also of infrastructures as well. The car there is, the example we just gave, is this line here from 1910. And interestingly, this red line here, this is the land line. We can see that severely going downhill now as we are relying more and more on mobile phones. So it's a familiar story. I'm sure you're aware of the well-established idea of diffusion of innovations, where you have innovators, you have early adopters, and by the time you get to the early majority, that's when the S-curve of accelerating change kicks in. Eventually you have the late majority, and then by the time you're the laggards, if you haven't already gotten on board, you're bound to be left behind. So let's move to the risks, the Earth system tipping point risks. And this is one of the things that we have focused on for the Global Tipping Points report, which was published last December. We identified over 25 Earth system tipping points. 5 of them are already in imminent risk of tipping. These 5 are the Greenland ice sheet, which is this one here, the warm water coral reefs, here in A, the West Antarctic ice sheet down at the bottom here, the permafrost regions in green, and finally the Labrador Sea subpolar gyre. Now the Greenland ice sheet alone has enough ice to melt, to raise sea levels by 7 meters. The West Antarctic ice sheet, another 3 meters. If we tip the permafrost regions, that's going to send billions more of tons of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. We want to avoid that. And we'll get on to the other system tipping points in a moment. But these 5 major Earth system tipping points, the biggest driver is, of course, carbon emissions, man-made carbon emissions. 40 billion tons a year of carbon dioxide emissions, and that's more than 50 billion tons if you include all the other greenhouse gases. What does this mean to you, 40 billion tons? Does it make your heart, does it touch you? It doesn't touch me. 40 billion tons is one of these numbers that is really hard to grasp. So let's make it a bit more human. If we get a box which is 1 meters wide, 1 meters broad, 1 meter high, and we weighed the air in that 1 meter cube. Anybody have any guess of how much carbon dioxide by weight would be in that 1 meters? Anybody? 0.7 grams, not very much, is it? So let's go bigger. The big theatre. It's a huge building, isn't it? 3,900 square meters of floor space, 14 meters high. What weight of carbon dioxide is just in the big theatre? Any guesses? No mathematicians. 40 kilograms. Not very much really either, is it? So let's get even bigger. Who's been to the San Siro Stadium in Milan? Huge, enormous building. It's about 230 meters by 180 meters by 80 meters big. And if we fill that, if we weighed all of the carbon dioxide in the San Siro, that's still only 2 tons of carbon dioxide. Now, the average carbon footprint in the world from the average person is 6 tons. So that's three San Siro stadiums worth of carbon dioxide emitted by the average person each year. So you and I, we are likely to be higher than the average. So let's say between 10 and 20 tons of carbon dioxide that we are responsible for every year. That's, what, 5 to 10 San Siro stadiums each. So what's 40 billion tons that's driving these climate impacts? Well, you'd have to go to the top of you'd have to stand next to the Madonnina, the golden Madonnina, at the top of the Duomo Cathedral, 108 meters high, and you'd need to take all of the carbon dioxide in a blanket around the planet from 0 to 108 meters, and that would weigh about 40 billion tons. To give you a more tangible idea of what 40 billion tons of carbon dioxide is. So these harmful tipping points are going to, if they do trigger, are going to represent the greatest threats ever faced by humanity. They are going to trigger severely and damage severely our planet's life support systems and threaten the stability of our societies. And of course, they don't operate in isolation. They have very strong cascading effects, so that a tipping point in one could tip another and tip another in a cascade or domino effect of change. 2 examples here. This snaking line is the North Atlantic current. It's part of the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. It's what keeps Northern Europe a lot warmer than it should be. And it has this tipping dynamic. It's either in one state or the other. It's either on or it's off. It's on, luckily, at the moment, but it has turned off many, many times in the past. It can turn off within the matter of a decade. It won't necessarily turn off in this century, but it's been declining since the 1950s by 15%. Nobody exactly knows when that tipping might happen. But the last time it happened, about 13,000 years ago, it reduced the global temperatures by 3 to 4 degrees. What's happening right now in this area here, the Labrador Sea subpolar gyre, just this small area here, this circulation is weakening and is at imminent risk, possibly, of tipping. This has happened in the past. If anybody's a fan of the Frost Fair paintings of Turner or Bruegel or Averkamp, they painted these beautiful frost fairs on frozen lakes and rivers in the 16th and 17th centuries. And that was because of a tipping point in the Labrador subpolar gyre. It lasted from 1250 to the end of the 19th century. And the real risk there is happening in the Greenland ice sheet. The Greenland ice sheet, where we have here, where you see Greenland, that's losing water, that's losing ice, melting through fresh water into the North Atlantic at a rate of 30 million tons per hour. Does that touch your heart? It's too big a number. So let's make it more human. Let's go back to the big theatre. 54,600 tons of water is this entire area right up to the ceiling. So there's an area, there's an amount of water, the same volume as this building, being lost from the Greenland ice sheet every 9 seconds. In terms of the San Siro again, the San Siro Stadium, that's one San Siro Stadium's worth of water being lost off the Greenland ice sheet every 6 minutes. We will get to the positive tipping point soon, I promise. Another major concern that we have to really look to our resilient supply chains that we've been talking about is the risk of global heating in tropical regions. There's a tipping point in the Earth's, in a human physiological capacity to withstand heat. And once you get above what we call the wet bulb temperature, people cannot survive for any length of time outdoors once you pass the wet bulb temperature. So even though an additional global heating of 2 to 3 degrees might not sound very much, it's a matter of life and death for billions of people in the tropics. So this is, and of course it will create not only problems for supply chains, it's going to cause possibly an awful lot of deaths and an awful lot of mass displacement of people from the places where they live to try to get to cooler places. All of these Earth system tipping points have social impacts. And so already when we're seeing the climate impacts at the bottom, they have an effect in social psychology, in the loss of social cohesion, in radicalization of communities under stress, political polarization. You have, as I've just mentioned, mass displacement of people. At the moment, there's 29 million people who are displaced around the world. There are effects to political systems in terms of conflict and political instabilities of many kinds. And of course, we have impacts to financial systems, and we're going to have to understand systemic risk much better so that we are able to get ahead of the curve and to avoid, or at least to adapt to certain things that we can't avoid. For example, the issue of stranded assets. There is a major correction coming, and the longer we delay it, the sharper that correction is going to be. There was a study that my colleagues did recently on the risk of total capital, and this includes human capital. Human capital is 3/4 of the total capital on Earth. So not just talking about the financial capital of fossil fuel industries, but total human capital. If we delay stopping investment in carbon-intensive industries beyond 2030 in order to achieve our net zero goals for 2050, there is a risk of premature depreciation of $117 trillion. If we wait until 2030 to begin divesting ourselves of capital-intensive investments, that risk goes up to $557 trillion. 3/4 of that is human capital. And so it highlights the real need to really think about systemic risk and join up our thinking so that manufacturing, education, skills and training are being planned to avoid the risk of that premature depreciation. Now, finally, the positive tipping points. We need to develop modular technologies that are standardizable, are replicable. This is why solar PVs and batteries are by far the the right way to go. They have the learning curves, they have the economies of scale to avoid, and we need to avoid investing in expensive, hard-to-deploy technologies if we want to see tipping points. The prime example is, of course, solar panels. They've reduced in cost by 90% and 30% within the last few years. We're terribly bad at predicting this, though. This is the IEA forecast of the last 20 years. The actual deployment is the black line. And of course, it's not just about technology. We have social contagion, which is another major driving force for change. And we can record that in how people tend to cluster their uptake. If they see other people with solar panels, they will want them too. And the levelized cost of electricity, including storage, is massively coming down for solar. By 2030, well, it's already the cheapest form of electricity in most of the world. By 2030, it's going to be the cheapest form in almost everywhere. Norwegian car sales, many other countries are now catching up very quickly with Norway, which is definitely ahead of the curve. 95% of all cars now sold in Norway are electric. And of course, we also have to have a just transition away from carbon-intensive industries. This is the coal industry in the UK. Coal power generation is now zero in the UK. I'm going beyond my time, so I will stop soon. But the main thing is that we need to look at, I'll have a quick sneak peek before I go at the things we're doing at the World Economic Forum. We're developing Positive Tipping Points Maps collection, which describes all of the main sectors that I've just been talking about, plus a few more like gender equality and nature-based solutions. So if you'd like to go to the World Economic Forum Strategic Intelligence platform, you will find out more about positive tipping points there. So thank you very much. And if I can leave you with one last thing, if there's any way that manufacturing can find it in its heart to fall in love with mandates, mandates are the most efficient way to rapidly transform in the way that we wish to see. So think about mandating for 100% renewables, 100% EVs, 100% sustainable food procurement in your industries. Thank you very much.
Steve Smith, thank you so much. It was really impressive, and what an introduction for our panels. Let's start talking about tipping point for the manufacturing sector, living on the edge, climate change and sustainability. We just heard it was not the festival of optimism, but there are also some positive tipping points, especially from technology. Let's discuss this with Luca Torelli, who's EMEA Operations PMO and Transformation Manager at EssilorLuxottica and Yan Manufacturing Leaders Member, with Vanya Manolova, who's Global Supply Chain Chief of Staff at Schneider Electric. Yes, please. Thank you. And Eric Anselm, Executive Fellow at the World Economic Forum Center for Advanced Manufacturing and Supply Chains. Please join me on the stage. And just one information about your participation. There's a very simple channel already open for SMS and WhatsApp. Ask your question and tell your story. I'm going to mention and ask also to the panelists. Let's show, please, from the directors, the numbers so everyone can take a picture and then use it afterwards. Here we go. So for every request, questions and SMS, not exactly every request, but it's +39 335 7085 439. You can take a pic, 335 7085 439, and I'll ask your questions to the panelists. All right, so Luca Torelli, let me start with you, with the youngest generation. We'll get to what and how young generation are looking at that. But before, at EssilorLuxottica, how are you handling, all the changes that are connected with transition? And the more closer you get to the real life and examples and what you're doing, and the best it is, Luca.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. It's an opportunity also to share things and thoughts about young generation, and especially from young manufacturer leader community. That is worldwide network that represents in more than 30 countries, and we hope to enlarge and to close the gap. So currently, I'm working at EssilorLuxottica. I'm being part of a graduate program that is called Operation Talent Program. So today, I'm working in EMEA perimeter, and I'm working closely for transformation. So today, we have multiple challenges, as we mentioned, and most of the people in the audience are working in operation and supply chain. So most of them are connected to innovation and how we can handle today the volatility and vulnerability of all our global supply chain network. So how we are approaching that in EssilorLuxottica, we have many challenges, and it's different across the globe. For sure, we have a strong concern about sustainability and innovation, and that is core part of our mission and our strategic pillar of the company. Especially, we are delivering that through a program that is called Eyes on the Planet, where we're trying to approach for each of our mission something that could deploy this concretely, and most of them, for sure, also with supply chain and operation. So what we are trying today, myself, I study in Polytechnic of Milan. I'm a management engineering. I'm proud to be part of YML community, where we are trying to spread awareness about sustainability in digital technologies, is to bring my young generation perspective in the way that in the past we used to tackle the challenge. So today is not anymore enough to consider business case or evaluation of investment taking into account only the traditional economical and financial perspective. But when we tackle this challenge, we have to also to consider what is this position of the company in terms of resilience and in terms of sustainability. So that's in a nutshell and how we are approaching to this topic.
All right, that was great. But can you give us an idea of any individual projects, maybe, that it's kind of an example of this?
Yes. So EssilorLuxottica today in operation is targeting to be carbon neutral in its scope 1 and 2 by 2030 all around the globe. So today what we are trying to do is like how we can convert each CO2 equivalent tons we produce in the world in our operation, and how could be that is translated from economics perspective. So doing that, we are not taking consideration just to say, okay, we are sustainable, but how we tackle that is like to make it pragmatically. So we try to internalize this cost, and that is making it more powerful, I would say. And that we are trying to do when we deliver our transformation project, I would say.
Absolutely. So Vanya Manolova, supply chain has been dramatically tested. There was a pandemic that was unprecedented, but then there's geopolitics. We are having wars, and more changes will come. We just heard with Dr. Smith, sustainability and the environmental tipping points we're living, and really, really big threats. How do you handle this, and how do you do what was one of the recommendations of the report of the World Manufacturing Forum, how to look at the risk management in general and to understand how to modify your supply chains?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be with all of you today. I hope I'm sitting under the right picture. If not, Vanya Manova, Schneider Electric, Chief of Staff. So, you ask a very good and straight into the point question. What are the risks, how we mitigate them, what did we learn? And last 4 years, supply chain overall, entire ecosystem of supply chain, all companies passed through difficult period, but not only we passed, but we also got these lessons learned through this difficult period. And this is something we should not forget. We are not in the peace situation, and we are not going to be in the next years to come. We should always work with that in our mind, looking at what we did, how did we go out of the COVID crisis, what did we improve to reach the next level, but also what are the next steps we should do to prevent the next crisis. And I think it was David that was speaking about the resilient supply chain and then speaking about the agile supply chain. What is the difference? Resilient supply chain was in the past what we do in order to really go out of the crisis, not lose our markets, and let's say recover in a reasonable period of time, maybe 3, 5, 10 days, depends on the company, the size of the company, the size of the supply chain. When we speak for agile supply chain, where I really ask all of you to think collectively, is we want to achieve not only this recovery for any of the situation that is going to happen, because I repeat, they will continue to happen, but we obviously want to gain new markets. And this is what I really think in Europe we should think collectively, much more stronger, and much more focused in this collaborative mode of winning new markets.
Sounds great. And then let's broaden up a bit the picture with Eric. Now, we know that Europe is struggling to find its own way. We had the Net Zero Industry Act during the last commission. Now, there's a lot of pressure, and we heard also from Confindustria Lombardia, to rethink the roadmap to 2035, for example, and so on. You, at the World Economic Forum, what are the main barriers that you see in the transition to a more sustainable manufacturing today?
So first, a bit of a disclaimer. I was not, and none of you, I guess, were born sustainably savvy. Yet, all of you are in a very unique position through your role in manufacturing or supply chain to influence some major flows. The physical flow, the cash flow, that the supply chain and manufacturing has been more and more in charge of, the data flow that is more spreading through digitization, and I would add a fourth flow that we are not talking enough, but which is reality, scientifically based, which is the carbon flow. So when you keep this in mind, the first element to your answer is a lot of us, because I spent my entire life in the supply chain at Procter & Gamble, from downstream logistics all the way to the executive committee managing innovation and supply chain digital transformation. But most of us don't necessarily feel like we are empowered to drive the supply chain decarbonization. We think like you need a chief sustainability officer, or maybe to spend 2 years doing an MBA to break through this. And that's the first barrier that actually we've realized as we started that initiative 3 years ago called the Industry Net Zero Accelerator. And I would give you 3 facts that hopefully will highlight the opportunity. You've seen in the report, the industry is responsible for 30% of the greenhouse gas emission, and that's kind of an underestimated amount, but let's take those 30%. The good news is that 77% of the top industrial emitters, amongst which probably many of you in this room, have committed to net zero target by 2050 and half of all emissions cut by 2030. Now, here is the catch. According to Climate Action 100, which is really scrutinizing and doing a survey in an anonymous way, only 3% of those top industrial emitters have acknowledged that they have detailed strategy and actions to go there, which has led us at the World Economic Forum with more than 50 partners to start that Industry Net Zero Accelerator so that we illustrate, demystify, and exemplify the how to get there. Because when you click on a supply chain assembly like we have today, and I've been doing this over the last 12 months, we systematically ask them the 2 questions. Is driving net zero part of the daily priority of your job? Answer, 50% of the people in the room say no, it's not yet. It's kind of being taught, but it's not as important as driving quality, cost, or cash. So that's the first opportunity. The second one, which is even more important, is that 67% of people like you feel they are not knowledgeable enough to operationalize how to decarbonize. And that's a huge waste of opportunity because actually you are the best placed people to drive that decarbonization. So our work at the Industry Net Zero Accelerator is to demystify and exemplify. I will stop here, but we basically have put 2 frameworks to go after the overall industry net zero transformation. Then we double-clicked on Scope 3, and we have more than 50 use cases from the early movers, including obviously Schneider, company like Luxottica, who are there to show that even though none of us have the whole puzzle assembled, all together, when we bring the pieces together, we can actually accelerate and drive it in a way that not only makes a difference for the planet, but also for the economy.
Vanya Manolova, it's very interesting. Are we accelerating? How do you handle these challenges inside Schneider Electric?
Challenges are here not only for Schneider, I believe for all of you guys. And I already saw some of our suppliers who are based here in this region, and very pleased after that to chat. But you know, I will say like that, I will paraphrase one supplier who came one day to us and said, why we love to work with Schneider? Because you are so foolish on sustainability that you make us eat our own broccoli. And let me explain what it means. Yes, we have sustainability in our mission and in our purpose. We have it after that in our business, and naturally, it's a part of global supply chain. We have various initiatives, and if I just tell you Impact Supply Chain, that is our 3 years transformation cycle, which started just now, 2024, 2025, 2026, and is a natural continuation of the previous transformation cycle. So inside it, you have one big pillar called planet. And inside planet, you not only have sustainability, but you have also the safety of our employees, you have the decent work at our factories, but also at our strategic suppliers. Of course, you have the net zero, but also you have the circularity, efficiency on resources, on raw materials, and you have this end-to-end holistic approach from the creation of the product up to the end of life of the product, speaking about circularity, designing the products correct from the first time, and finishing their end of life through the circularity. And I can tell you that by having the circularity, we were recognized, by the way, by World Economic Forum for our circularity solution on Master Pact, produced in Europe, in Le Vaudreuil factory, in Mastertech factory, apologies, in France. And we see that through this circularity solution, we save 40%, up to 40% of the raw material. So that's enormous. So think for entire model that you can create in a company, in a product, in a region, you name it, and they see the impacts you are bringing to the society. So this is what means sustainability for us.
That's a very interesting experience and vision. Luca Torelli, we understand this is a transition which is irreversible and we have to go there full force. But at the same time, Eric mentioned some constraints in terms of, for example, knowledge inside the organization and how to change the culture of an organization to make it a priority, a daily priority in the business of and the work of everyone. How do you do this? How do you practice this in EssilorLuxottica?
So definitely young generation has to bring a strong commitment. That's, I would say, first of all. And then before EssilorLuxottica, also with young manufacturing leaders community, we are trying to spread this type of awareness. So one of the key barriers today we are facing, because from technological standpoint we are quite ready, is from a perspective of sustainability, we have to change the mindset of senior management. So I think there is more and more commitment towards that. And young generation, if they are empowered with a strong mission to deliver that, I think they will represent the trigger point through which companies are able to lead these topics and achieve this goal. I think not because I'm Gen Z, but for sure we are the first that we are bringing this new mindset into the company and empowering young generation, but not only, everyone in the company that is doing that or is transforming and unlocking the power of passionate people on sustainability will bring to the company strong value. And that I can ensure that it was my experience, is my experience in the world of EssilorLuxottica.
That could be one of the positive tipping points, allowing more younger generation at every decisive layer of companies and the corporate culture to change it more rapidly. And so, but you know, there's also longevity on the other hand. And so older managers that tend to remain for a longer period. But let me get back to Eric and Sam, because you mentioned before scope 3. And we know that for the head of the supply chain, the largest company is one of the most difficult things to handle, understand, and guarantee for all the rest of the supply chain in terms of measure and how to do that, and what are the signs of changes that you can see in the market?
So Scope 3, like anyone in this room, when I really got into the topic with our team, it's quite intimidating because it's quite complex at first glance. It's out of your direct control. I would suspect that many of you are already familiar with Scope 3, but basically it's everything which is upstream and downstream your operations. So you have to work not just with your suppliers, but also anticipate how your consumers are going to make a good use of the product, including the end of life. There are several lenses through which supply chain leaders are uniquely equipped to tackle Scope 3, and I would even say to do so in a joyful, positive, and stimulating manner. In fact, it's one of the most intellectually stimulating fields I have seen over all my career. Why? Because think about the carbon flow that I just alluded to earlier. When you think about the financial flow, all of you would be pretty comfortable calculating a return on investment or a cash flow or even, the cost of a product, right? It's not intimidating you, even though you are not in the finance organization. It's a bit the same when you think about the product carbon footprint. So the first difficulty we have is measurement, because you can't really properly improve what you don't measure with accuracy. And right now, most of the Scope 3 emissions are being estimated based on corporate average. But I will give you one other hint that if you click on the Industry Net Zero Accelerator or through the report that David just shared earlier, there are a lot of industry coalitions that have developed for their sectors the right level of norms, allowing them to calculate product carbon footprint with the right level of granularity below the norms that ISO already help you calculate. So basically, ISO is the standard, but if you really want to go to the right level of granularity, you need to go through your sector industry coalition. So make good use of that. If you are in the chemical industry, for instance, go for Together for Sustainability. BASF, to name just one company, is able now to track more than 1,000 product carbon footprint with their supplier, which means that they can pinpoint the hotspot and really laser focus on where they need to improve. So measurement is definitely the first element. But overall, I would conclude by saying Scope 3, it's really the mindset shift. It's take responsibility and harness collaboration. That's really the key from a mindset shift to go after Scope 3. Once you are there, measurement, technology, and all the rest will flow.
Absolutely. Recommendation number 1 of the report this year was embrace change, but to measure change, you need some metrics, Luca. And how do you handle this? And how do you see the targets and your road to hit the targets?
So definitely, I think for all the company working in supply chain and manufacturing, generally speaking, we are dealing with so many stakeholders along the value chain. So it's definitely not easy journey and path to reach that. So today, in EssilorLuxottica, we recently signed SBTi commitment, so Science-Based Target Initiative. And today, there are plenty of different measurements we can use. One of them is to adopt life cycle assessment methodologies. It's definitely a challenge to find some standards that are globally recognized. But I think in operation, that as mentioned before, today represent the industry 30% GNH emission is something we have a little bit to speed up. And on top of that, today more and more relevant, we cannot just say, okay, the investment is measured in payback time or return of investment per se, but we have to integrate some other financial figures that is not per se enough. But we have also to integrate to other measurements, other KPIs that is not connected only with economic and financial flows, but how our footprint will impact our world, how we can reduce it, how we can mitigate our not only environmental responsibility, but also social responsibility in the region where we are operating. So that, I think, is key to embrace on all the industry, and especially the one that are most pollutant. So in these terms, as mentioned before, for sure, cross-industry collaboration is a key and determinant opportunity to speed up this process.
Vanya Manovola, what's your approach to all of this in terms of also reporting? Because we know that there are new rules and guidelines for reporting, how companies' non-financial reporting can get where the community wants them to go.
I love this question. We are very, very passionate, and my two co-workers here said it already very clear, but let me say it like that to rebound on what Eric said. You need to measure in order to improve. So when we speak about decarbonization, we first have to strategize it for the company, digitize, and then decarbonize. And if I look at our net zero approach program we have with our suppliers, speaking for scope 3 emissions, 1,000 of our biggest suppliers, which represent 70% of our CO2 scope 3 emissions, are a part of this project. And we committed to decarbonize the CO2 emissions from these suppliers till 2025 by 50%. And guess what? We are about to do it. And as I said in the beginning of this talk, we have some of these suppliers coming from this region. And how we do that? We do it first through the enthusiasm. It's there. And I look at you as the new generation, Luca, allow me, but I also look at the wisdom. The enthusiasm is there everywhere and in every generation. It cannot be a top-down approach. This is a bottom-up buy-in. So create this atmosphere, partner with your suppliers, with your customers as well, all around the supply chain, and generate after that these ideas that are coming from the workshops we are having with our suppliers. If I tell you, if I measure 1,000 ideas coming last year from suppliers on co-innovation, 30% of them are focused on sustainability. This is massive, enormous. It is something we leverage. It's something that gives competitiveness to us, but gives also competitiveness to our suppliers as they are able to exchange and improve together further.
And do you see this as a trend which is growing?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, create the spirit. We also have our sustainability ambassadors, which are inside our factories on the shop floor. And I invite you, if you have been in one of our factories, you enter, you can go to the shop floor people, and they will speak about sustainability. This has to be in the heart. It's not a talk for the top management. It's a talk for everyone in one company, and we believe in that.
Ricky, you were nodding in terms of it's not a top-down movement, it's a bottom-up.
Absolutely. It has to be both, obviously. If you are a shop floor employee, you know the role modeling message that you see from the top is very important. And I know Schneider Electric very well in their approach, and Murat Tamoud, the CSCO with whom Vanya closely works, is just a role model. I mean, it's very authentic. If you know Jean-Pascal Tricoire, also the former and the current CEO, they have been in this journey in a very authentic manner. So the top-down is very important, but then very quickly, it's really about how do you educate in the sense of how do you give both the holistic understanding of the journey map, demystifying, as I said, and allowing everyone to understand where they can play. Because the interesting thing is that if you look at the decarbonization path for any company, most of the early part is exactly aligning with what our typical supply chain targets are. It's all about efficiency. It's all about, trying to be lean. So there is a perfect match at the beginning. Where it starts being complicated are two things. When you need to invest in the green energy supply, because as explained earlier, you have a tipping point of shifting from the current fossil energy to the green energy. And the second is that sometimes you also need to transform the type of product you are doing and go to circular business model. But it does work from both ends in the sense that it cannot be just a top-down message. And the best companies that we have seen, the early movers, are really companies where, in fact, all employees are having a sense of pride in contributing not just to the traditional supply chain results, but also to the sustainability and the carbon reduction.
Luca Torelli?
Yeah, I fully agree. What I was missing to say before, and perfectly aligned with that, is the role of academia in that. I think the cross-collaboration that is coming from university, young generation, and also industry practitioner is fundamental to tackle this challenge. Because when we are considering the scope 3, so it's not the company per se that is operating, but it's more challenging because we have plenty of actors that are working on that. And I strongly believe, as recently graduate, and I was on this stage just 2 years ago to receive some award of the contest of YML Association Network, that is, it will be crucial for the future to tackle the new challenges that are connected not only to sustainability, but also to resilience, and if I may, also to human-centric approach.
Vanya Manolova, it's time for the audience questions, and please, let's show again the number you can use. First question is about the goal of 2030, and all, our discussion, our perspective by 2030, and the target is neutral, carbon neutrality at 2030. Do you feel like that the company and its supply chain can reach the target based on the evidence you have on the ground?
And thank you for this question. I will speak here more on the SME side, because we see it quite often and a lot speaking for sustainability for companies like us, where we commit, we do our targets, because we also have the meanings and the resources and the capabilities and the people. So it's not to say that it's much easier for bigger companies, but we also have the obligation to support the other companies to achieve this target. And this is what I would like to really talk to in front of you guys. Because it doesn't matter if you are driving a big company, medium or small size. If you're not helping each other and not thinking that sustainability is a part of your core business, you cannot make the difference. And this is where Schneider Electric wants to make the difference, again, through our partners. And when I was talking before that about the way we cooperate with our suppliers, we don't just say, hey, we want you to be at that level. We go inside their premises, we bring our experts, we give them the digital tools, we support them in this journey, we make our workshops inside their premises, and this is how we want them, not only us, to achieve our target. Sorry, it was a bit larger, the reply, compared to the question, but I don't want we focus just on one company. I will be really happy when we speak about sustainability to speak for all of us collectively.
Luca Torelli, do you have any targets like that at EssilorLuxottica?
So we have multiple targets. So the positive things in our company is like the global footprint, but quite vertically integrated structure. So that gives us the opportunity to make the change more effective and faster rather than to other companies. So our value chain is quite integrated, is quite condensated. Today, we have more of 200,000 employees all around the globe. We are present in more than 150 countries. We have from the production side until the retail eye care shops. So that gives us a big span of opportunity that is not only connected to our operational field, that's where I belong to, but also in the last mile of understanding what are the feelings of consumers that today are more and more keen toward sustainability, but also to less pollutant products. And so today, there are plenty of challenges in our company, so plenty of objectives to be targeted and achieved.
Erik Anselm, a question for you before your takeaways. And the question is about the relation between supply chain and circularity. How supply chain and companies can approach circularity, especially in terms they are asking the use of materials and so on, and how do you see this in terms of helping the transition to a more sustainable manufacturing?
It's huge. Actually, the supply chain is literally the organization that can help not only dramatically change the operating model, but the business model. I was extremely positively surprised at a recent industry conference, which gathers every year the largest chemical industry in the world, to see that there were so many sustainability topics on the agenda, and to see one of the major chemical players announcing a $1 billion investment in the northern of France to establish circularity within their overall chemical supply chain. And they had one mantra that I think summarized everything about the change. They basically have used their head and projected what a successful business would look like in the next 10 years, and they realized that the source of material, what they call feedstock, and the chemical industry is the one that is the closest to the earth material extraction, that feedstock would be lacking. So they basically made the mantra, feedstock, waste is the new feedstock. If you actually talk to one of the major supplier and customer of Schneider Electric, whose name is Nexans, probably none of you have heard about Nexans. This is a major B2B company that provides copper cable and cable for electricity. They have projected that they are going to run out of copper, while there is a huge need to change the energy grid across the world. So they are starting now to set themselves up in order to recycle all the existing copper that most of the time was just wasted. So supply chain is absolutely at the center, and whether this is just a mindset shift, which is a starting point, or obviously an adjustment of the processes, bringing the technology and driving the operating model change so that you can allow your business to adjust your business model. So supply chain is just at the heart of it.
Vanya Manolova, there is an interesting question because they're asking, does it pay, also in financial terms? Because the question is, have you experienced positive financial outcomes for your ESG activities so far?
I love all these questions, and thank you. You know what? It pays. If you do it at the right time, at the right level, and with the right partners. And Eric was just talking about the raw materials, about copper. But you know what? Circularity is not just for circularity. But then think about the scarcity of raw materials. Obviously, you are winning money by having the circularity. Obviously, you are giving the right example. But you are solving another big issue that can knock on your door tomorrow. This is the scarcity of raw materials. And always when we think about sustainability, we should put our brain one step ahead for what is coming after that. Disruptions are not going to stop, neither today, neither tomorrow. And when you tackle the question of sustainability, have this into your mind. So you're having free profits from one circularity. And then again, Europe is leading in this direction from consumer point of view, really focus on sustainability. There are many customers that will prefer you for your green solutions, and I'm sure you know that. Of course, there is still a part that we will not care about that, but you remember what we showed before that on how, presented here on the stage, on how people copy-paste? Now the new generation is coming. The new generation is much more focused on sustainability. And we are giving this right example. We are driving now. We are the motors, the engine of that. But then they will come and they will totally focus, and that will be the payback for your business in the long term.
Well, Eric and Sam, we have to wrap it up a bit, but I'd just like to connect with this. Because, you know, for more than a decade, we had a strong financial push also in terms of going towards sustainability. And at the World Economic Forum, Davos, that's where it all started, the conversation started. But in a few weeks, in Baku, COP29 will start, and the major leaders of the financial systems will skip this. Maybe Baku is not the easiest location to reach, but there's something beyond that. And I opened this discussion reminding that in Europe, we're discussing how to make sustainability sustainable from an economic standpoint, especially for manufacturing. What's your take on this? Will we accelerate, or shall we suffer, a pullback in terms of the velocity in the transition?
I think we need to be pragmatic influencers as an industry. In an ideal world, you would really love to see public-private collaboration unified together to work against the goal that Professor Steve Smith just highlighted, and Professor Steve Smith, you are not the only one. I mean, there are thousands of scientific leaders across the world. I mean, I urge you, take a look one day at the summary of the IPCC report, the latest one. As scientific people, you must take a look at that. First, because it's scientifically based. Secondly, because you are a citizen, right? So if you look at what great minds across the world from so many different countries, nationalities, whatever, have put together, this is the perfect. It's like a Hollywood movie, This is the reason why we all come together and we work against the same goal. Now, when I say pragmatic influencer, we all know that the world doesn't work that way, and particularly with the geopolitical tensions that we are seeing. So we must continue to be relentlessly optimistic in influencing our public organization, in pointing out to them how not acting on supporting that transition will not just hurt the planet, but will hurt the people, the economy, and that is really important. The second element, pragmatic, because even if we don't see the public organization moving at the speed or in the direction that we want, because by the way, the world is not perfect, and we are not perfect, we need to take responsibility and be the one who actually show the way, which is again what, through the Industry Net Zero Accelerator and some of the companies here in this room, we can show the way that you can actually make progress tangibly. I will give you example from the company I was working for, P&G, right? 57% reduction of scope 1 and scope 2 between 2010 and 2022. A massive responsibility taken to educate consumers on how to use responsibly laundry product to cut scope 3. So continue to work relentlessly with public organization because it's absolutely critical to accelerate, but at the same time, don't use that as an excuse and take responsibility to actually show the way, because we are the best place to change the game.
That's a great point. Look at Aurélie, just a few flashes, two flashes, and the first one is connected with what Eric was saying, because there's a question asking, you are cooperating in the supply chain with your supplier to reduce your carbon footprint, but how about consumers? You're a B2C company. If consumers' goals are not aligned, it would mean that effectiveness of your sustainability goals is not the best, but so how would you handle this towards consumers?
So first sentence about circular economy. So during my studies at Politecnico, there was a first year I attend circular economy business model stream. And we were just 7 people attending this course. And at the time, it was a little bit far away. Today, I had lunch with some students. I was saying, surprisingly, that it's quite populated course. So the way of thinking and approaching to this topic is becoming more and more popular. To answer to your question, I think that circular economy and sustainability is not anymore an option, but is definitely an imperative. So all the companies are moving and are changing their business model because the consumer are changing their attitude to buy and to purchase. So just to provide an example, today we launch as EssilorLuxottica some new project inside Moraga Vigano that is one of the most important optical retail in Italy to extend the product lifespan and trying to expand servitization model to expand the product life cycle. So basically, our frames that today maybe you suffer about visual defects could be changed for a short period of time. So we are reducing that. We have also retail that we are trying to be carbon zero in its internal layout. So that is not driven, as mentioned before, just a top-down, but is a bottom-up approach, and definitely is coming more and more urgent also with these big corporates.
Well, look, I've got a tough one for you that comes from the audience, and I kept it final, because you are one of the young leaders, but mentioning the younger generation, the question coming from the audience is, we're talking competitiveness, but there's a trend for the youngest generation that they do not want to compete. They do not want to consume, they do not want to have children. It's a worldwide situation, they say, after COVID. To me, it's a bit of a stereotype. But I want to hear your comment for this in terms of also the future of manufacturing.
So how much time we have all the conference, or just 2 minutes? So to wrap up, I think first point, I don't think that young generation do not want to compete. We can bring plenty of examples. So I think our generation is committed to compete. I mean, I think young generation is here more keen
I
to
think
take...
that you are an example
yes,
of that.
I mean, maybe not me representing the best, but for sure someone that is committed toward challenge, I would say. Second, how to tackle democracy issue. Maybe you have to start to think in another way. So is young generation don't want to have a family or are not in the right economic condition to have this as prerogative? So the world is changing, and that's to conclude about they don't want to consume. I mean, consumption, we have to rethink in a different way, as were mentioned before, in a different perspective of business model. So sustainability and circularity will open new wave and thinking about circular business model.
Well, manufacturers, they want to have families, they want to grow, live, and consume. Let's allow them. So rethink also, you know, in terms of this is a very Italian topic, but also the salary and the wages of the people. Thanks again, Luca Torelli, Vanya Manolova, and Eric Hamsan. It was a pleasure having you at the World Manufacturing Forum. It's time for a coffee. You earned that. In 15 minutes, we'll be back. We're running a bit late, so please be on time. Grazie.